Good afternoon. This is a Devar Torah on Parshas Vayishlach. It's a very long and detailed parsha covering a lot of significant events. When in the end of last week's parsha, Yaakov and his whole family and all his children, his possessions, came into Eretz Yisrael, were met by new angels. In this week's parsha, he realizes Esav's coming. And he, to pacify him from the whole business with the stolen blessings, brothers, he decides to send him gifts with the angels that are accompanying him, of different animals and other things, as a peace offering, so to speak. And then the night before that, he decides to split his camp into two, and he anyway moves his two wives, the two maid and Bilhah and Zilpah, the two maidservants, and all the children and all the property. And then he goes across the Yabuk River. He's on there by himself. And then he confronts, an angel confronts him and is wrestling with him, struggling with him till the almost the dawn of day, and the angel cannot defeat him. Now, just to explain, an angel can take human guise, as he saw with the three angels that showed up at Abraham's camp 3 days after the Bris Milah, and finally at dawn, Yaakov cannot be defeated, but Yaakov is wounded because the angel touches him in the sciatic nerve. He had a permanent limp after that. In fact, the sciatic nerve, which is in the end of the thigh, in the rear end of a cow or other types of animals we can eat that are kosher. In the case of humans, it's near the reproductive organs. In any event, the angel said, then he tells him, not leaving you, give me a blessing. What is the blessing he gives? The blessing he gives is that you have strived with man and God. I mean, in this case, meaning his divine angel that God had sent. Angel itself isn't divine. The angel that God was sent and represents the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, which I'll have a lot more to say in a couple of minutes. And then he meets Esav. Things work out well. He then introduces all the maid servants and wives and all his children, except one Dinah, which has two unfortunate consequences. One, he should have allowed Dinah to be seen. Esav could have married her, and her influence might have turned him around, in which case he wouldn't have been the evil enemy of Arpia, the Jewish people, for the next thousands of years. And in any event, he doesn't, and because of that incident when he could have turned Esav, she could have been with Esav, who was the brother of Yaakov and was circumcised. Instead, she wound up being kidnapped in the city of Shechem, by Shechem. And he takes her and he sexually assaults her. When the brothers said, if you want her as a bride, we're going to mix the two peoples. The men have to get circumcised on the third day. When they do, which is the worst pain, 3 days after, Shimon and Levi come in, kill all the men, and rescue and take Dinah out. The parsha then goes on to Yaakov having Yaakov at Bethel having a new covenant with Hashem. He's referred to as Israel. It's the other name that was given. And he said, God tells him to be fruitful and multiply. The only trouble is have more children. Except he doesn't. How do we know that? There's the incident where Reuven moves Bilhah to bed. There's many interpretations of that. I'll probably speak about that more in the future parsha, from the final parsha of Sefer Bereshis, and uh, it then announces his 12 children. This 12 tribe, the 12 children, which make the 12 tribes, and then the parsha goes on to say that Yitzhak passed away and he's buried by, and then on the way from, before that, on the way from Beth El, on the way to Beit Lechem, Rachel has a very hard childbirth and dies, giving birth to Benjamin, which he originally called Benjamin, Oni, and my son of my sorrow, and that's after that. He goes up. They all go up, and they have, and that's when the incident occurs with Elaine. And then finally, it says that Yitzhak dies, Esav and Yaakov bury him jointly. The last part of the parsha is a very detailed listing of the descendants of Esav and when they joined up with and when they go to Seir, all the people from there. And finally to the Edomites. And this is the announced names of all the kings and their wives. And there were 8 kings of count as 8 kings of the Edomites before they have the first king of Israel. Again, that has profound meanings which are beyond the scope of this Devar Torah on a deeper level. In any event, what I'd like to focus is on the incident of Yaakov wrestling with the angel. I've already given the outlines and facts on that. Now, there's a number of questions I'd like to ask on it. I outlined it simply above, but let's look at some of the questions on that portion. First of all, I'm going to ask number one. I'll answer the questions a little later. What is the connection of this incident to Hanukkah? Also, what is the connection of this incident to Tisha B'Av, saddest day of the year? And before we get to that, that's 2 questions. The third one is why did they have to mention the river that Yaakov crossed the night before? And how to cross the Yabok prepare him for his confrontation with Esav, and as it actually was the angel first. Now, and what is the significance of the name Israel? Now, in trying to answer some of these questions, let's look, first of all, why did he go back across the Yabuk? He took his wives to the other side, his children, his animals, all of his property. So why did he come back? What was he hoping to achieve there? Now, on one level, he had left a couple little containers behind. teaches a few things on a basic level. It teaches us that even one should respect all the property Hashem gives us, even the most simple things, little flasks. But there's something far more significant. Those flasks contained oil. Those were passed down generation to generation till the time of the Hanukkah story, where the oil appeared miraculously in a flask that had the stamp of the Kohen Gadol, because the Greeks had adulterated, rendered tamei, impure, all the oil in the temple at that time. And as we know, and I'll be discussing when we get to Hanukkah, one day's oil burned for 8 days. Many questions, well, what's the miracle of 8 days? Because it could have been 7. As I said, I'll discuss that when we get closer to Hanukkah. So there is the connection of Hanukkah to the whole story. Now, I'd like to look at this whole business with the river. So that was on one level. That was one level. Now, what is the second level? The second level is the Yabok River. Yabok River, what would he hope to achieve there? Now, he brought back, assuming you go with the version that he brought back the Hanukkah, what ultimately became the Hanukkah oil and the Hanukkah miracle, there's still a question of what else did he achieve? Now, I'd like to look at a deeper meaning of the word Yabok. This is based on Shar Gilgulim, and if you look at the letters of Yabuk, it should base Kuf. Now, let's look at that for a minute. Because when you because it says that a man has 3 levels. He has the name of Hashem, that is one level. Now I'm going to go a little into the names of the 3 gods, names of God, and we have to understand it comes from the pasuk of Tehillim, and that name, the verse in Hebrew, Yanenu b'yom Korenu, which goes for God answers on the day we call. You have the verse Yibenu, Yimnenu b'yom Korenu. Literally, the King will answer us on the day we call. And those first Hebrew letters of each of those, Yud Beis Kuf, are there. Now, how does one get redeemed? Through repenting. How do you do that? Through the names, the three names of Yabuk, and so what do we see? Is as follows. When a person only has nefesh, and let me give a little analogy to this. They say there's three levels of when how a person perfects themselves. Now, at the level a person only performs mitzvahs, he gets the world of Asiya, but no more. It's similar, they give an analogy, it's similar to a woman whose husband has gone overseas and left her unclothed, hungry and thirsty. She's like a divine presence that sits in exile, like she is today in Jura for thousands of years. This is the nefesh. Well, it lacks a ruach. The ruach is equivalent to the husband. Now, if a person learns Torah, Yaakov was doing all this, then he merits his own sake, then he will inherit the ruach, and then he will be like a woman whose husband has arrived, lives with her permanently, and takes proper care of her. Now, if a person goes and learns the deeper wisdom of Hashem, then he gets the level of neshama, and he becomes a complete person. That's when he says, like God's name is man. So let's go a little deeper. So somebody only has the nefesh. He will only receive life from Hashem with the name of Adenut, Aleph, Dal, and Yud. When he learns, but when he learns Torah for its own sake, he gets the Ruach, which is the Yud K Vav K, the name which Hashem created the whole system, so create all the worlds. Now, when he learns the deeper meanings of the Torah, the secrets of Torah, he merits the neshama, and then he gets the name Ekyeh, which has an Aleph, Hey, Yud, Hey. Now, you take all these names together, add all these names together. In a person, they have a gematria of Yud Kuf, Yud Beis Kuf, Yabuk, and those three letters are the names of the river. So what it's saying here is that on a deeper level, Hashem, Yaakov had perfected himself, and on that night he was completing that perfection of himself. So when he confronted Esau's angel, he at that point was ready to deal with it. And Esau the next day, because once he defeated Esav's angel. Esav didn't have any power over him the next day. Now, so from there, the angel, after he wrestled with him, he could not hurt him. He could not defeat him. Yaakov was stronger because of his righteousness and having reached all these levels. However, there was a little problem. He weakened him. He weakened him by striking him in the sciatic nerve, which is near the reproductive organs. Now, and permanently left him with a limp. Now, what does that mean? It's because as great as Yaakov was in the way he had elevated himself and ultimately triumphed, the Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Hara had still weakened him. He didn't have full bitachon and emunah, belief and trust in Hashem and faith in Hashem, and therefore he was able to strike him. We see that something now, wrestling with this angel could have at least either been literal or a prophetic dream. The same thing we see when Yaakov had an earlier incident when he was battling, when he came to the Temple, what later became the Temple Mount, and he saw the ladder with the angels climbing up and down. Now, those angels, they all had a different number of steps. The first three, it represents, according to many sources, the first three exiles the Jewish people had to go in after Egypt, which was Babylon, Persia, and then the Greeks. Fourth one, the angels didn't go up and down, the angel kept going up. Now, Yaakov got scared. What Hashem was hoping Yaakov would do was, if you want to call it an actual image, actual incident, or it's a interactive prophetic dream, he was supposed to go up the ladder and knock Esav down. If he had done so, that would have been the end of Esav's power, and we wouldn't have gone through the exiles of the last exile of almost 2,000 years. But because there was still some uncertainty, he failed. And the same thing here, he got him by the sciatic nerve, which is the area from which children are created. And it teaches two ways Esav attacks us. One is he could attack us with brute force, and if he can't succeed us with brute force, he'll try to tempt us. In other words, join our universities, become one with us, become one people, which is a challenge they faced in the next time with Shem, which is what Shem was suggesting, even though they weren't from Esav, one of the Canaanite peoples. In any event, it left us with that for the last 2,000 years, where we've been facing Esav in various guises. In the last 100 years, for example, we showed in the United States, which is pretty much, at least until recently, a friendly environment for Jews, and as opposed to the countries that are trying to destroy us, the forefront of that being the Germans, Nazi Germany. In any event, despite all that, we still managed to prosper. We still survived. Now, having said that, so what is the connection with Tisha B'Av that I asked before? Because that's the main day of the power of the Yetzer Hara, where Hashem allowed the temple to be destroyed by the Romans, the descendants of Esav, and the Avera of that day, the 365 negative commandments, the Shlach Kodesh says, which is the Avera of that day that one is not supposed to do, in other words, mitzvah not to do it, and that's eating from the Gita Nasha, because sciatic nerve, because that represents the Esav factor. that's been so that we have been battling with through our entire history. Now, the name Yisrael was the next name he was given. Now, because he'd achieved the three levels that I had explained, and unified himself with prayer, learning, and deeper learning, he needed a new name. He merited a new name, as is also explained in Shagr Guling, and that new name was Israel. Now, taking that name Israel for a minute, it has a number of meanings. Now, one interesting one brought by in the Sefer Lakutim is the following. If one looks at that name, Yisrael, it's spelled Yud Shin Resh Aleph Lamed in Hebrew. Now, what's that a reminder to? It's a collective name of the names of all the other Avot and Imaot, because if you take Israel, the other name of Yaakov, you get Yitzchak, which starts with a Yud, Shin, which is Sarah, Rivka with a Resh, Rachel with a Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and Avraham. Not in that order. You have to reverse the order of some of them, but in any event, that includes all of them, because they're the ikar of all of them. He says the ikar, he's the essence, he's the central. And it's through him that we, and remember, only he had righteous sons that we descended from, that did not apply to Abraham and Yitzchak. So on that level, he needed the name Israel. That also explains on one reason why after Rachel, Cain, in Teretz Israel, she died in childbirth. A number of reasons given, but she was the partner for Yaakov in the formation of the Jewish people. Once the Jewish people had formed, and the day-to-day role of the Jewish woman is to maintain the family, be the anchor of the family, Leah, who I spoke about in last week's parsha, is more long-term internal Jew, the eternal Jew, the Pinteliad and everybody. She was the one for him in Israel in the form of Israel, which is a higher spiritual level, more hidden spiritual level, though we are called by that name. And in that higher spiritual level, he merited that. In fact, God said, I'm going to start a new covenant with you at Bethel, new covenant. And he told Yaakov to be, Israel to be fruitful and multiply. Yet, Yaakov, yet that night before Reuven moved to bed, Yaakov should have been with Bila. Now, why Bila? You would think if he's now in Eretz Israel in a more spiritual role, he should have been with her that night, because that night there were supposed to be twins created. Who would they have been? This is explaining Lakute to also. Who would they have been? They would have been Ephraim and Menashe, because Ephraim and Menashe represent the ability to live in exile, to prosper and survive even among a nation. They did that with Egypt, but if the Debut hadn't been moved and Yaakov had been with Bila that night, they would have formed up a generation earlier, and therefore we wouldn't have needed the lessons of Mitzrayim, even if we'd gone down to Egypt and for the next couple of hundred years. it would have been, with their influence, it would have been, they would have all stayed in Goshen, they would have all learned Torah, they wouldn't have gone out and tried assimilating, wouldn't have led to all the anti-Semitism, which Pharaoh at that point triggered the slavery that he committed and all the other events that we're well aware of. So, therefore, even though Leah would have been a better role model in one sense for having the children, because they still had to exist the day to day, and even if it had been a benign exile in Egypt, that still needed the role, if it's not Rachel, because she was no longer there, of her maidservant, that same influence. Now, from all of this, the Torah, from all of these incidents, we can see that ultimately, and even though it spends a lot of time discussing Esau's relative for later on as a king of Israel, and that eighth king represents Rome, yet as we see Rome in its previous manifestations and now in its current one, we've survived all of them, and we're now coming to the level where we will be at that Israel level, and we will succeed, and hopefully the long galut exile we've been in will be completed, and we should get the redemption soon. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.